Media reflects and perhaps reinforces cultural values. The study of film is important because it reflects the values of society. These images may represent social reality. According to Natsby, film is a historical text that mirrors the prevalent attitudes of American culture during the time that the film was produced. Lawson suggests that media has the ability to reproduce and influence culture. How race is constructed is mirrored in American mainstream film. Miller and Stamm contend that Hollywood film refers to an industrial and rational mode of highly consumed cinematic production. Its purpose is to sell tickets to the largest audience possible, which increases profits. To attract a large audience to purchase tickets, films must play to the audience's belief and concerns. According to Miller and Stamm, Hollywood does not intend to educate, but rather to entertain. However, Benshoff and Griffin argue that the Hollywood film industry is not as harmless as some think. The Hollywood film industry is an ideological state apparatus. An ideological state apparatus, or ISA, is a tool used to oppress the population without using overt force and without the subordinates' knowledge that they are being oppressed. Hollywood is able to do this by shaping American ideology hidden under the guise of mere escapism. Without challenging ideologies promoted by Hollywood, images of all people are thought to be natural or as truths. In addition, Giglio states that it is not by accident that those in power seek to control the means of communication, one which being film. Dominant groups are able to have their agenda supported by the masses. Giglio further explains that even if a film is entertaining, it still advances political messages and promotes the status quo. Because of this, Hollywood is able to shape ideologies concerning gender, class, race, etc. In contemporary culture, media are used as primary agents of socialization. Media have the ability to represent a world that otherwise would not be accessible to many of its consumers in the immediate social environments. Roe Billard claims that media has influence on behavior. The media also allow individuals to know groups that they have not encountered. Because of this, media is a system of racialization. Media have an assortment of functions. Media entertain, inform, and educate. Media give their consumers glimpses into the world of others and allows consumers to understand their own social realities. Media influence how social groups view themselves and other groups. Media mimics social life. Segi takes this further by asserting that not only is media a mirror of our culture, it actually shapes our culture. Film is a language used to construct reality by attempting to make sense of the variety of messages and behaviors our culture and packaging and reproducing them as fiction. Reality is a social construct. Abby Ferber claims that what we know about reality is shaped by our culture and social interactions. We make sense of culture and social interactions through ideology. Ideologies are stories we tell to make sense of the world. Two people may have the same culture and yet have very similar social interactions, yet perceive very different things because of their individual ideologies. Our various places in a racialized hierarchy produce different social realities. These realities produce a myriad of ideologies concerning race. This is what Margaret Hunt calls our race ways of thinking. Some ways of seeing or ideologies are more accepted in American society. Those that are more accepted have a form of social power and racial domination. One particular ideology that we will focus on in this course is white supremacy. Ferber states that at the core of white supremacist fear is a fixation on interracial sexuality. She asserts, interracial sexuality is a convenient threat deployed to guard against intrusion upon white male political and economic dominance. White supremacist fear of interracial sexuality intensified after the Civil War. Fear of interracial sexuality was conflated with the fear of racial equality. According to Yancey and Lewis, during Reconstruction, the question became whether blacks and whites were now allowed to marry. A few states lifted the ban on interracial marriage. After Reconstruction, federal troops were removed from the southern states, and many of the steps towards racial progress were retracted. Many states reinstated bans on interracial marriage under the claim that marriage is not only a right among consenting individuals, but also a states' right. Not until the 1967 U.S. Supreme Court ruling in Loving v. Virginia did laws against interracial marriage become illegal under the 14th Amendment. White supremacy is an ideology based upon racial differences. Verber attests that the study of white supremacist movement is not only the study of racist ideology, but of the construction of races themselves. White supremacists are against the fight for human equality. Equality is perceived as a threat to white male privilege and power and a threat to the existence of the white race itself. White supremacists argue that equality means sameness. Difference, in their point of view, requires and rationalizes a racialized hierarchy. Interracial sexuality would eradicate difference and make everyone the same, eliminating human diversity. Steps towards equality, such as desegregation and affirmative action, are explained by white supremacists as an attempt to increase interracial sexuality, the delusion of difference, and the extermination of the white race. White supremacists are against interracial sexuality because it is thought of as polluting whiteness. Interracial sexuality crosses the arbitrary boundaries of race. A more realistic explanation of white supremacist fear of interracial sexuality may be that black men in particular, are viewed as an economic threat. Verber posits that the more rationalizations against interracial sexuality were just persuasive arguments used to convince other dominant group members and politicians that interracial sexuality should be banned. Yancey and Lewis report that interracial sexuality has had a constant presence within the United States since the arrival of Columbus in 1492. Interracial sexuality was not considered acceptable or desirable, but did not have the same negative ramifications as interracial marriage. Interracial marriage legitimized and institutionalizes a union between two supposed societal unequals. Although interracial marriages may seem to have had a tremendous increase in recent years, that is not the case. According to the 2010 U.S. Census, about 10% of all marriages are interracial marriages. Black-white marriages are even smaller in number. Although black-white marriages have the highest societal profile and their numbers are assumed to be numerous, black-white marriages comprised of 0.7% of all marriages in 2010. Verber claims that the low number of interracial relationships, and specifically black-white interracial relationships, may reflect American beliefs that sex between individuals of different races are taboo. Black bodies have been stereotyped to justify white oppression. These stereotypes were reinforced by social mores, institutionalizing laws that formally and informally punish those who engage in interracial sex. Yancey and Lewis assert that banning interracial marriage legitimized and segregated society through the use of Jim Crow laws. Those holding a white supremacist ideology contended that those wanting to end Jim Crow did not want to do so to have a more equal society, but rather to have more freedom to have interracial sex. Fear of interracial sexuality is not only about race. This issue also intersects with gender and class. In a white patriarchal capitalist society, white men have the most power, privilege, and wealth. Opposition to interracial sexuality is about the control of bodies. For instance, during slavery, interracial sexual unions were not seen as threatening as long as white men were in control. Sex was not between two equal partners. The white sexual partner has more power in terms of race. Men have more power than women. Lewis contend that because of unequal social power positions, interracial sexual unions often do not result in marriage. In addition, these authors explain that since men value sexuality more than women, interracial unions have historically involved a white man and a woman of color. White supremacy particularly regulates the bodies of white women and girls. Instead of viewing movements towards social justice and equality as positive, The fight against racism is perceived as a guise for an attack against the white race by the means of interracial sexuality and mongering. White purity is not a problem if white males have interracial sex and produce children. It is a problem when white women are engaged in interracial unions. Verber claims that in a white supremacist ideology, the white female represents the entire racial community. Penetration of white female bodies symbolizes the pollution of the white race. In addition, Verber posits that within white supremacist ideology, white women do not have control over their sexual partner choices. When white women are partnering with black men, they are labeled as brain raped or brainwashed by pro-race mixing agendas spread by Jews, the media, and or feminists, and that she is not acting on her own free will. Often, when images of interracial unions come to mind, there are black men and white women. Focus on this type of union has resulted in regulated social demeanor and creation of laws to prevent the marriage between consenting adults of different races. In particular, sexual unions between black men and white female bodies undergo regulation. These regulations have propagated through media's myths of black male animalism and sexual type for white women. This justified the lynching of thousands of black men. Verber explains that while relationships between white women and black men are condemned and described as repulsive, relationships between white men and black women were common and remain beyond condemnation. Even if a child resulted from the sexual union of a white man and black woman, white purity is still protected. The one-drop rule attests that the racial blood passes through the mother. The child may have a white father, but will be considered black if the mother is black. Black women are characterized as sexual objects in white supremacist ideology. Black women are regarded as promiscuous and over-sexualized, justifying the rape and coercion against them. In comparison to white women, black women are not regarded as even as women. According to Verber, black women are considered the antithesis of white women. As stated previously, the media heightens the focus of interracial unions as being taboo. Yancey and Lewis propose that media should be examined to see if media reflect what is actually happening in regards to interracial relationships. Historically, media have ignored interracial relationships. This may reflect how interracial relationships were feared and the stigma attached to them. Childs contends that movies reflect the long-standing positions of interracial relationships where white men had more power and freedom to cross racial boundaries compared to all women and men of color. Movies are often thought to be merely means of escape. However, movies are texts that allow us to interpret what is happening in our culture. Interracial relationships are not normalized in movies. They are portrayed as different from relationships with same-race partners. Within a movie, there are tropes, which are themes. Childs argues that there are occurring tropes in movies about interracial relationships. Some of these tropes include interracial relationships as being deviant, colorblindness, and conquest. In the deviant trope, crossing interracial boundaries is constructed as deviant. Whiteness is normalized with black identity as being biologically and culturally different from whiteness. Charles argues racial differences are exaggerated in scenes that are dangerous or comedic. Another trope is the white savior. Often men are characterized as saving the woman, community, civilization, or even the world. The white man's world is portrayed as desirable. He sweeps away, saves, or otherwise enlightens the woman of color. Often white men are protagonists in film, even if they are conquerors. In movies with interracial relationships, white men conquer women of particular cultures, and those women symbolize their entire culture. The white savior role is gendered. When white women are paired with white men of color, she heads towards a downward spiral. Colorblindness is a theme in movies about interracial relationships. Colorblindness privileges whiteness and perpetuates racism while denying race matters. If racism is portrayed in the movies, it is usually at the individual level and can be overcome. Institutional forms of racism are not mentioned. Movies with interracial relationships often never mentions race as an issue within the relationship, but instead has a colorblind discourse. Class is a substitute for race in some of these films. A lower class person, usually a person of color, is paired with a person of a higher social standing, usually a person that is white. Charles asserts that this represents how popular culture views interracial relationships. In addition, Charles argues that images of these relationships should not be read as though interracial relationships are acceptable, but rather should be understood as representing a group's interests. Similar to legal restrictions against interracial relationships, Hollywood has restrictions. Historically, interracial relationships on screen were rarely shown. Charles explains that depictions of interracial relationships were censored to reflect the culture of the time. The Motion Picture Production Code, otherwise known as the Hays Code, was adopted in 1930 through 1968 to restrict and/or forbid certain images, including interracial relationships. Images of interracial couples are also gendered. White men are saviors or conquerors, black men are animalistic. White women need to be protected, repressed, and/or possessed. Like white supremacist ideology, if a white woman is in a relationship with a man of color, she is depicted as sexually promiscuous or as a prostitute. According to Charles, this portrayal can be read as a reinforcement of patriarchal dominance over white women, as well as women of color, while signaling the dangers of being involved with men of color. Because a white woman crosses racial boundaries, she is undesirable and not deserving of white male protection. In films with interracial couples, the black community is portrayed as being opposed to interracial relationships. Black people are depicted as rude and have problems with interracial relationships, while a few racist white individuals are exceptions to whites' overall acceptance of interracial relationships. Black men in interracial relationships with white women are cast as being sellouts or not being black enough and or not committed to the black community. According to Childs, this representation of black opposition to interracial relationships allow opposition to be voiced without implicating whites. If black opposition to interracial relationships were to be depicted in a more accurate way, it would include opposition based upon the historical atrocities experienced by blacks from slavery forward, such as the rape and coercion of black women by white men and lynching of black men falsely accused of raping white women.